you're teaching your students to be your competition. It's like, well, who cares? Like that's
Exactly.
the goal, right?
Yeah.
That's the goal. I want my students to shoot better in the long run, and if they shoot better than me, then fantastic, you know?
Well, it goes both ways, though. It
Yeah.
also makes you do it right.
But and it makes you try to like, well, you're trying to figure out, be a master of your craft.
Exactly.
And so you've got to go as deep as you possibly can to set yourself apart
Mhm.
from other people. And I'm sure that there's things that you've discovered along the way that you're just like, we're going to kind of keep that one close hold or not. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Modern Day Sniper Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Caylen and in this episode, I sit down with a really good friend of mine, Mr. JD Thomas, to talk about all things precision rifle gunsmithing, and we get into a little bit of single cut point rifle barrel making. So this was a really interesting episode. We get a little deep into the weeds on some technical stuff, but all in all, it's a good conversation about people that are interested in the intricacies of precision rifle making. So I had a great time with this conversation, and I hope you guys enjoy listening to it as well. If you guys haven't already, make sure that you're a subscriber to the Modern Day Sniper podcast, and you can find that over at Podbean, iTunes, or SoundCloud. And we're also on YouTube, streaming our video podcasts as well as our audio podcasts on that platform. So a like and a comment really helps us out. We read every comment that you guys post, so make sure that you let us know what you think of the episodes, so that way we can cater what we are doing for you guys specifically. That's our goal. We want to bring you guys the most up-to-date, relevant, precision rifle-oriented information in the industry today. So if you guys haven't already, cruise over to the moderndayRifleman.com platform, where we have a growing community of discerning shooters just like you who are looking for unbiased information and help from their peers in their journey in precision rifle. Over there at moderndayRifleman.com, we have a free side, which is an open forum where you can have conversations, share information, read articles, and help each other out in your journey with precision rifle. On the other side of moderndayRifleman.com is our Advantage program, and that's our monthly training service. And in that monthly training service, you're going to get 4 hours of content a month, plus all of the backlogged content that we've had from years prior, which for now is 3. So in the content vault, notwithstanding the current information that you're going to get, there is well over 150 hours of high quality pre-recorded video instruction and live question and answer sessions that are easily searchable and contain loads of information that you're looking for. So in the monthly training service at Modern Day Rifleman Advantage, you guys get 1 hour of lecture on a technical or fundamental shooting topic every month. You get a guided practice session along with a monthly shooting drill, as well as an hour and a half long live question and answer session with myself and Philip. So all of that comes along with that Modern Day Rifleman Advantage program. So I would highly encourage you guys to check it out. It's got a tremendous amount of value in there, and we're constantly updating that platform with the newest information that we have available to us. So on top of that, a lot of times shooters are wondering, where do they sit with regard to their shooting skills? That's a really important and difficult question to ask yourself, and we are helping you guys out with that. We have recently sat down and formulated our kind of version of where we think shooters are on the spectrum from novices all the way on up to mastery. And you can find that quiz in the comments below in the linked section, or you can go to moderndayRifleman.com and look for it in a pinned post in that forum, and you'll be able to take that quiz and figure out where you are in our spectrum. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to let you identify where you should be in our training progression when it comes to our in-person training classes, and you can find the schedule for our in-person training classes at moderndaysniper.com under the events tab. I guarantee you're going to be able to find a rifle training class that's appropriate to your skill level within a reasonable distance from your home. And if it's not already, we will most likely be visiting your area very soon. So make sure that you check that calendar out. There's nothing like showing up to an in-person training class. And we're really not even looking at this as a training class anymore. We are really focused on making this an experience for our customers, and we want you guys to have the best experience possible. And if you're a sponsor of Modern Day Sniper and you're listening to this episode, we want to thank all of our sponsors very much for taking the time, effort, and energy to put into us and our mutual success. So without further ado, enjoy the episode, guys. And remember, keep your face on the gun. Dude, thanks for coming.
No, this is
Trying
cool.
to do this for a while.
Yeah.
And, like we just like to kind of keep this, super chill. And I mean, I just want to talk to you about gunsmithing because I want to learn how, that's like for me, the next thing that I want to learn is like how I want to learn more about how barrels are made, and I want to learn more about the machining process and like what's really important. I think like we were talking about yesterday, there's so many things out there that I think people go way too far down the rabbit hole with that don't really mean anything.
Absolutely.
And I think, both of us have probably been there in the sense that we've gone from, I don't really understand what I'm doing to, okay, I've heard like with reloading, for example.
Right.
Okay, well, I think this is the way I should go. Well, maybe I should turn necks or uniform primer pockets or deburr flash holes, weigh brass, weight sort bullets, blah, 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 right?
Get so far into the land of diminishing returns.
Yeah. And then you go, okay, well, is this really giving me what I want or what I even need? And then you go, okay, well, then there was chasing the lands, and then now we've discovered that chasing the lands doesn't mean anything, right? And then now, like with modern bullet designs, like when we were shooting VLD bullets, yeah, you kind of had to, right? Your rifle could come out of tune, your pressure curve would come out of whack, and you had to do something about it, right? And the only way that we could do that was to either add powder or push the bullet closer to the lands,
And
as
generally both.
yeah, exactly. So you're manipulating all these different variables, but like, what are you actually getting out of it? You're getting that accuracy, but at the same time, you're like, well, is it my barrel wearing out? Now I've got all of these other things going on that I'm just like, what is it?
Right.
And now we've gone to, I learned a load development method from Jaden at Hornady.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, hey, I have something, I need to get this done fast. I can't do an OCW test. I can't do the whole thing. So what do you guys do? And he said, let's do 4 charge weights. If your powder charge is 60 grains or less, half a grain increment. If it's 60 grains or more, 0.7 to 1.0 increments. And he said, identify your threshold for accuracy and velocity, I guess spread,
Yeah,
your extreme spread, like what's going to be acceptable for you personally. And he said, you're going to find it in those 4 charges. You're going to find it in there.
Oh, yeah.
And then you look at it and you're going, oh man, I used to do like every 3/10, and think that you're seeing something, but it's kind of like lost in the noise.
Well, and when you're just doing that much shooting with such small increments of change, is it just you did things right on that one?
Right.
And you did things wrong on an actual better charge? It's hard to tell the difference when you're doing such small changes and looking for, much smaller changes in what you're producing, and then, but it can be lost in your personal performance.
Right.
Because we can't do this in a wind tunnel like some people can, and with high-tech equipment to hold the gun in a certain way that can be repeatable and just takes all the human element out of it. But then again, when you put the human element back into it, it kind of makes a lot of that data invalid.
Yeah, and that's what I started to notice. We discussed a little bit yesterday too. I've had really good success with the Dan Newberry's optimal charge weight, and I've always had not always, but I would say probably 80% of the time, the charge weight and the group that I see with regard to, the consistency and the point of impact, it generally yielded a low extreme spread and good accuracy. Then I started to shoot like 10-shot groups. And then once I started to shoot 10-shot and 15-shot groups, I started to really see that, okay, well, if I printed a baller ass 3-round group, that 3-round group could migrate around inside the constraints of the 10-shot group or 15-shot group, right? So
then
you're still,
ask yourself the question: is that the shooter? Is that the gun? Is it the load?
Right.
Well, unfortunately, we have to take all these into account at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's all piled into one thing.
Yeah.
There's a dude that came out with a book. His name's Jeff Seward, and he's been on Hornady's podcast a couple of
Okay.
times, and I'd love to have him on our show. But he wrote a book called The Non-Bubba's Guide to Ammunition, and it's
I'm
about
already
that thick.
interested.
It's awesome, right? Jeff Seward. It's actually in the house over there, and very analytical, like extreme. He's an engineer. He's a physicist. He's got a background in physics, and so I'm sure he worked for many companies or several companies. I don't know, maybe just one. I don't know, but he was in. I mean, he's done everything from like big bore, like artillery pieces, all the way down to the small cal stuff.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I found most interesting was, in a nutshell, what he talked about with regard to dispersion was dispersion, meaning the accuracy that we can get from our rifle is dependent on two things: barrel pointing and how concentric and stable is the bullet in the bore.
Hmm.
Because once it goes in, if it goes in
Crooked
crooked, it's staying crooked.
gets reshaped to that.
Right. And now it's going to come out, and that
Hmm.
normal bullet precession and nutation is going to get even worse because
Hmm.
it's off axis.
Absolutely.
So the other thing too is modern chamber design. And you can speak to this too, because
Hmm.
I guess maybe before we get too deep in here, who are you and what are you doing here?
So a lot of it for me is that I'm not really anybody huge in the industry. I've gotten to do some pretty cool things in some pretty cool places. I've worked for. My name's James Thomas. I'm a gunsmith. I've been a gunsmith for, I think we figured out, 18 years. Um, Done most of my work in the precision rifle or long range rifle types of gun building, which is funny because that's not where thought I was going to be when I got into gunsmithing. And then then I worked for a barrel maker straight out of gunsmithing school and literally put the grooves on the inside of big chunks of steel and turned them into guns. And then went to work for Macmillan Rifle Company. Got to build a lot of cool guns for a lot of cool people there.
Yeah.
Got to see my guns go all over the world and do good things to bad people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that makes me very happy. And then after Rock McMillan decided to sell his portion of the building over to his brother, I went back to making barrels for a while and then moved back to Washington State and been smithing the whole time.
So, okay. So you started smithing in 2008.
Roughly, yeah.
Roughly. Yeah. Okay. So you started smithing and then you went into barrel making.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about barrel making.
Barrel making, the way that we were doing it is as old a school as you can possibly get. We did single point cut rifle barrels.
Mm-hmm.
So very slow process. Uh, you drill them, you ream them, and then you cut the grooves to depth, a little bit at a time, all the way around, and a little bit more at a time. And we can go into the weeds in this in a long ways. I don't know how far you want to go, but and then from there we would thread them, chamber them, put them on guns. So, and everything from guys that were going to Africa for safari rifles and big bores to guys that were competing in FCSA, the 50 caliber bench rest stuff, and the NBRSA, the National Bench Rest stuff, and the smaller calibers, which was a fantastic test bed.
Really? Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, because you get guys that want to go out into the weeds on that stuff to get that extra little bit, and we got to find out honestly what made differences and what didn't.
Right. And so, okay, well, like what made the difference? Like, give me an example of a couple things that you found that you made differences on.
Okay, so when I first showed up at Classic, we were making barrels and using a diamond paste to lap the barrels because the super popular thing was to have the absolute smooth and shiny.
Yeah.
We had a customer that was a gun writer that wanted to go out into the weeds, and he wanted it polished to a certain level. And it got down into the micros for the diamond paste that we were using. Did it exactly the way I want it, made sure that it stayed within tolerances for the bore and groove, sent it off to him, and put it on the gun. 35 Whalen. Should be very easy to make shoot.
Yeah.
Big bore, low case capacity. Should be very easy to make shoot. And it just didn't.
Okay.
And he called us up and he says, "Well, I'm just going to use it to fire form." So he literally went out with 3 of his buddies and about 400 pieces of brass, and he was fire forming brass. And they were literally just pounding rounds down the bore until about 50 before they were done, and they thought they'd shoot it for a group, and all of a sudden it's a one-hole gun.
Okay.
Then he sent it back to us. We started doing a bunch of looking on it, and it had texture in it now.
Okay.
So we did some playing with this, and believe it or not, the friction inside of a barrel has something to do with accuracy, and
No kidding.
most likely through creating a very stable pressure curve.
Yeah.
You know, if you're throwing a ball down a greased hole,
Hmm.
well, if it's super slick, you can't guarantee what that friction coefficient is going to be every time. You get a little bit of buildup, you lose a little buildup, and then you get your extreme spreads and just how the bullet is let go.
Hmm.
You know, different muzzle pressures and things like that. So we learned right off the bat that the whole super smooth barrel, that absolutely glossy thing, it's of no value.
Mm.
You know,
And so you guys figured out that smoothness was actually more inconsistent.
absolutely. And I want to take it past just being smooth. It was polished to a mirror finish, like literally running your finger down a piece of glass.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. The texture level in it was so small that it just didn't have a good grip on the bullet. I mean, yes, it obturates the bullet into the lands and grooves, but it doesn't hold on to it after that.
Okay.
Um, so I have a feeling that, just primer ignition would move the bullet farther down the barrel one time than it would the next time.
I see what you're saying.
So where is your pressure curve in your barrel? You know, and then we found out that, yes, it does make a difference if it is smooth. Now let me define smooth a little bit. That all your machine marks are going in the same direction.
Hmm.
Okay. If you have reamer marks in your bore that are, perpendicular to the bore line, that can cause some problems. Those are gonna change over time.
Right. Okay.
Okay. But if you have them already going in the same direction all the time, it, I find that your people's barrel break in and their how easy it is to find a load happens so much faster
Right.
just because of the way the barrel's shaped on the inside.
Okay. So and this might just be straight like heuristics and potentially placebo effect, but what I've noticed is obviously like now with the advent of bore scopes,
Mhm.
everybody's got one
Yep.
and it's like the talk of the internet. I saw a post yesterday. This guy had it was on the 6BRA Facebook group and he posted a video of I mean, you could if that bore was a floor,
Mhm.
you'd have been able to eat off of it.
Mhm.
And he looked, and right at the end of the chamber where that 90-degree edge is,
Mhm.
there was just a black shadow underneath that. And really, it was just a shadow that was caused by that 90-degree corner.
Yeah, the reflection of the light, you
It-
can't
yeah.
see
And it's
anything.
like, you can't, and he was just like, I can't get this carbon ring out. I can't get this carbon ring out. And I didn't say anything, but everybody was like, bro, there's no carbon ring in there.
Move the light.
Yeah. But there were other people that were just responding and saying, do this, do this, do this, do this. But the people that actually knew what they were looking at said, "Nah, man, that's actually probably a little too clean." I mean, he had it clean, clean. And I think with the advent of bore scopes, it's like barrel makers and gunsmiths' worst freaking nightmare
It has
because,
sold a lot of barrels,
yeah,
and it's put a lot of barrels on guns that didn't need barrels.
sure, yeah, because now it's just another layer in the mind of going, did I get it right,
Mhm.
or is that the problem right there?
Mhm.
And it can drive you crazy.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So
And then you get people that think they know what they're looking at.
yeah,
And then on top of that, even as a smith, I've learned that just because it looks right or looks bad may not be.
right.
And okay, so something else about me is that I don't prescribe to a lot of the voodoo that a lot of gun builders do out there.
For sure. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I believe in quality machining with quality practices
Yeah.
results in quality product.
100%.
Okay. Um, And to say that, I've literally looked down a barrel that looked like a sewer pipe on the inside. No discernible rifling whatsoever. This is a 30-06. The gun weighs 6 pounds. I can provide the gun to you if you would like. It's atrocious.
Hmm.
And it still shoots a half-inch group
Right.
all day long. And which flies in the face of everything, right?
Hmm.
Um, so, I mean, we've had that. I've got empirical evidence on that it works. Now, granted, I won't want to bet on it working every time,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
you know, it takes a lot of this. Well, it's got to be a certain way thing out of my mind.
Hmm.
I also had a customer in NBRSA that he went to the range, 1,000-yard range. He printed a wonderful 4 1/8 inch group with factory ammunition of all things, and I'm like, why did you take factory ammo first of all? But he did. Um, and then unscrewed his barrel, looked at it with a bore scope, and proceeded to tell me that the throat wasn't straight, and it would have been a better group if it was perfect. And I start to wonder, do we actually know what perfect is?
Yeah, for sure. Right.
Okay. Come to find out, the throat was straight, that it was a different manufacturer's barrel, and the particular groove that he was looking at wasn't the same depth as the rest of them going around.
Mm-hmm.
So it looked crooked, but it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's little things like that that really have always put in my mind that people will wrap themselves around an axle looking for this reason that they didn't get the accuracy that they were expecting.
Mm-hmm.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't think you're doing it right, you're not going to do it right. Or if you can have an excuse that there's something wrong with the gun, well, then it's not your fault
Right. Now
or your process of load development.
we're getting into that. We're getting into that whole mindset thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So like if you believe that your rifle's going to have a cold shot
Yep.
point of impact shift,
You will.
it's going to
Every
Yeah,
time.
for sure. I mean, it's
I've-
placebo for a reason.
I've fallen prey to it myself.
Yeah, for sure. Me too.
So,
And it's the same thing like we were talking about earlier with the load development process where you're like, oh, well, I have to turn necks, or
yeah.
I have to use uniform primer pockets. I have to do this in order to get this goal that I'm trying to achieve. But then, no, actually you don't.
Well, there's several different types of shooters out there in the world,
For
isn't
sure.
there?
Mhm.
Okay. So you have the people that shoot to reload,
Mhm.
reload so they can shoot, and the people that just like doing the testing and playing with it.
Yeah, the tinkerers. And we've said this a bunch. It's like, hey, those tinkerers are
They are a wealth of information.
Yeah, we benefit from that ultimately. And I was one of those tinkerers too. And then, you go through that and you say, okay, well, this is diminishing return, right? You're not wasting your time, because if it really makes you think
Exactly.
that you're good, then roll with your bad self, man. Just go for it.
Well, and you've been instructing for how long now? How much of shooting is mental?
Almost all of it. I mean, really, like
There's a little bit of physical involved in it, but
Mhm.
most of it's mental.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
So,
And that's where my mind is right now with shooting, because I haven't really, I never really took competition serious. I just used it as a method to go validate my training, see what
Mhm.
my skills were. But I've never really focused on being a good competitor.
It is a
And
different thing.
it's a very different thing. And I'm really, I like the challenge. I think it's going to be an awesome challenge. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, but you've got to get your system. You can't have any doubts,
No.
right? If you roll up to that target and you think, and you're like,
Ooh,
man,
this one might be out there at a
y-
distance that I'm having a little bit of problem with.
you
Guess
will
what? You just
miss.
missed.
Yeah, you will miss. It doesn't matter what happens. You're going to miss. And if you hit, it's straight luck,
Mhm.
totally straight luck.
Even though you did everything right, it's still straight luck in your head.
Damn
So,
right. So it's this really unique thing that you get into. And there's so many other disciplines to it. I had a friend of mine. He's fourth in the world in parachute canopy flying,
Okay.
and he was my my second skydiving coach, and I met him up in Chelan, and he came here, and you're actually the second person to sit in that chair in a podcast. He was the
Oh,
first one. So
outstanding.
yeah, we talked about just his, the mental process of, I mean, he's flying that parachute straight at the ground at 100 miles an hour, and he's flying over the ground at, a few feet with literally pinpoint accuracy. And so mistakes are obviously, you might not live through a mistake when
Exactly.
you're flying that fast.
Yeah.
So um and watching him as he's progressed, and watching him go through all of the different mental processes that he's tried this didn't work, tried this didn't work, tried this, okay, this works. And his consensus was, I just don't think, I just rely on
On a
the,
process.
on my process. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, he says, if I catch myself thinking in the airplane, he goes, people think that I got Tourette's because I just like say, stop thinking. People are like, what the hell's wrong with you? But it's really the same thing. It cross pollinates into shooting, because if you are thinking, you're probably not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
There's some cognitive process that has to come from saying, "Oh, I'm off the right edge. I need to add 3/10 of wind." That's a cognitive process that
Well, and,
we need to do.
and evaluating the environment as well. I
Yeah.
mean,
Mhm.
that you're doing when you're walking up, but it's still part of the process. It's not, well, what if?
Yep.
Well, when you start doing, well, what ifs, that's when it
Exactly.
starts going out the window at that point. You do
Exactly.
that on your days you're not shooting.
Yeah. So going back to the mechanics of all of these rifles, right?
Hmm.
So the grand scheme, they're just really just giant screws, right? They're just giant fasteners.
In a
And
lot of ways, yeah. It's just uh, a gas pipe with a cap on the end
mhm,
to hold
right.
everything together.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you would say, when you're looking at your process as a gunsmith? What are some things that are really important that contribute to that end product of, hey, this rifle shoots?
Okay. It's very simple. The things that have to be concentric.
Hmm.
And I can go through those. And the things that have to be perpendicular to the bore have to be perpendicular to the bore.
Hmm.
Um, it's just that simple. It's like we're talking about just with a bullet. If it's going into the barrel crooked, it's going to come out crooked. It's going to be reshaped. Anytime you're doing something like that, you're throwing variables into the mix that you can't count on,
Hmm.
thus variable. So for me, the threads on the outside of the barrel at both ends, both the muzzle end and the chamber end, have to be concentric to the bore. And there's several ways to accomplish that task. Some people go out into the weeds on them, into the land of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
And some of them use some techniques. Hopefully, I don't infuriate anybody, to give them perceived value
Sure.
for what the work that they do.
Hmm.
Because the last time I checked, concentric is concentric, and it's measurable, and it can't be argued.
Hmm.
Um, Perpendicularity. So crowns have to be perpendicular to the bore. Otherwise, it lets grow the bullet crooked.
Hmm.
The shoulder on the barrel to meet to the receiver has to be perpendicular to the bore. Otherwise, it's just not even pointed in the same direction your scope is.
Right. Hmm.
Okay. Same way when we go farther back into the receiver, the lugs have to be perpendicular to the bore,
Hmm.
so they're not twisting and reshaping during the explosion that's going on in the chamber. Same way with the bolt face. If you start putting angles on these things, even if they're slight angles, um, it starts causing some serious problems. Because you cannot depend on things being in the same place every time. So much of accuracy is consistency. If I guarantee that I can put that bullet in the chamber and hold it the same way every time, okay, the mechanical part of it is now fixed at that end of the barrel. Then I just have to fix the mechanical end at the other end of the barrel of letting it go the same way every time.
Hmm.
Okay. And then it's up to load development to get it started, accelerated at the right rate, and released at the right pressure to have it fly.
Hmm.
I mean, I hate to say it, it's that simple.
Really, yeah. So When you okay, so obviously things that need to be concentric, things that need to be perpendicular, so on and so forth.
Hmm.
So talk to me a little bit about the difference between older chamber designs and newer chamber designs with regard to newer cartridges versus older cartridges. And I really what I want to go get after is sensitivity to seating depth.
So we've learned a lot about throat angles
Yes.
and free bore.
Yes.
Okay, so the amount of material that we remove from the end of the case neck to the very beginning of the gentle start of the rifling,
Yep.
and that has all been done through bullet technology. We're learning more and more about what flies and what doesn't, and how fast something can fly. Um, just because we put more powder behind it doesn't mean it's actually going to fly faster for any farther.
Yep.
So, we've been playing the game between short throats and Weatherbees. I mean, those are
Yeah,
probably
the
your,
two
your two
complete
complete
opposites.
extremes right
Yeah, yeah.
there, right? Um, they both have their reasons, and a lot of those reasons are going away just through bullet design.
Mhm.
I mean, companies like Hornady and you know your VLDs and your Burger Bullets and all those guys, they're putting so much more technology now into the bullet shape, which is, in my opinion, completely revolutionizing what a gun is actually capable of now.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it does also get rid of the chasing the lands in a lot of ways, because we figured out how to make a bullet that isn't so sensitive about how it gets to the rifling.
Mhm.
Okay.
Like Sierra Match Kings.
Exactly.
Like a Sierra Match King will generally shoot out of everything
Yep.
just because it's so much more gentle and easy going into. I
Yep.
mean, it just makes sense. Like if you can visualize it,
Hmm. It'll guide itself
it'll
in.
guide
It's
itself.
it's it's a it's a nice angle to go into a funnel, and it
Mhm.
doesn't care.
Yeah.
You know, which is great until you get past a certain distance, and then we start running into problems of flight.
Yeah, that's bullet though. That's
Yeah, that's
that's
the that's
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 external.
yeah, that's external, but getting it into the barrel, it's got a great design, and it does great over a distance. But after a certain distance, then that design just doesn't hold up anymore.
Right.
That's why we're getting into some of the other ones like the LDMs, the LDXs, and that type of bullet shape.
Mhm.
Um, which is the natural progression of things.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not bad mouthing anybody on their bullet design. It's just we're learning. We have better technology to be able to measure this stuff now.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you're still talking about like 6.5 bullets. Everybody, 6.5 this, 6.5 that. The reason why it is where it is because the Swedes started doing this work on it over 100 years ago.
Mhm. Right.
Okay.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was just in Salt Lake with my buddy Len, and he's got a Swedish Mauser, and it's beautiful, and it's a 6.5 by 55 Swede.
Hmm.
And he goes, "I'm taking it to Africa, and we're gonna put blood on it
Oh,
because."
absolutely.
And we went to Africa in 2015, no, early 16, and all three of us took 6.5s, and we shot 40 something big game animals with 6.5s, and the PHs were just blown away. They were just like, how are you guys getting it done like that? And they shot the rifle, and as soon as they shot it, they
They
were
go,
like,
oh.
how can I get one of those? Because it's not beating the shit out of you. And these guys are carrying around like 338 Rem mags and all that big
416
bore still.
Taylors and all those kind
I'm
of stuff.
like, they're shooting like these little tiny, these little tiny antelopes. I'm like, what do you shoot that one with? And they're like, that. I'm like, damn, dude, that's pretty savage. It's
Gets it done though.
a little unnecessary, but sure. Um, but so let's talk. I want to talk a little bit more about that throat design and the lead angles. So what's changing there? Is it the angle or is it the position? What's changing?
Most of it's been the angle over the years that I've been noticing. Buying new chamber reamers and things like that. They come with a print, so you look at them. I tend to trust reamer makers.
Mhm.
They stay on the cutting edge of that stuff,
Yep.
and so I can figure out what they're doing.
Mhm.
We've seen the angles get longer. So when I first started doing this, most of the standard hunting stuff that I remember seeing around was to 1.5 to almost a 2-degree angle on them, and you're seeing a lot more ones now.
Okay.
Um, at least in the stuff that I've been doing here generally. Now, some of your bigger bore stuffs are going to be a little bit, steeper, probably into the 1.5 degree, but you're still talking about a long distance
Yeah.
for that big of a bullet. Um, we're figuring out that you don't have to have it run into a wall,
Yeah.
especially with these newer bullet designs. You can ask it to start twisting instead of making it start twisting.
Hmm.
And I think that's been probably the biggest change that I've seen is that we're lengthening the throat angle out.
Hmm.
And I think that's also been a real help in giving us more velocity with the newer powders,
Hmm.
with older cartridges.
Right. It's funny. I listened to an episode with Jaden. I think Hornady's been doing a fantastic job with their podcast of putting out amazing free information. I mean, and they do it in video format too. So, and a lot of times Jaden will have a computer here and they'll screen share, like he'll show graphs and just visual aids to
Mhm.
help you understand things. And they're just chatting. They're like, man, if you could just be inside that chamber, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids,
Yeah,
and just like see and watch that bullet go by and slow it down and see what's actually happening because we don't really know.
we have to
We
guess.
we got to guess,
Yeah,
and a lot of it's heuristics in the sense of like, well, if I see this happen, then it's got to be either A, B, or C.
right,
So let's eliminate. Let's try to get it down to what is A, B, or C,
right.
and then you start
And then what affects A, B, or C?
exactly right. So that's why they're saying now that there's no you don't really have to chase the lands so much anymore because of those shallower throat angles and the bullets or the throats are less sensitive to the bullet engaging with the rifle.
Right, because think about it this way: if the that's already laid out there to a longer angle,
Hmm.
and it starts to burn away, which it naturally does, is it a big of change? As if you were to assume that it's say it's a 2-degree angle,
Hmm.
which would be really steep for anything modern now. Um, if you were to burn 10% of that off, that would be a huge difference in
Yeah.
comparison to burning off that same amount off of a one.
Hmm. Yep.
And just in how your bullet engages and how your pressure spikes.
Yep.
So that's why a lot of people, I think, chase the lance before is to maintain that same pressure curve.
Yeah, and accuracy too. The thing that I noticed, I have a 6 BRA here, and I've tried it. I've tried 4 different bullet designs in that chamber, and there is one bullet that shoots lights out. I was having issues with it, and I'm just looking at this thing. I'm like, this is a BR. Like, this thing should eat anything that you feed it to a certain
To a
degree.
degree, yeah.
You got that super long neck that,
Hmm.
those guys knew what they were doing, right? They knew exactly what they wanted
Yep.
because they're understanding the same stuff that we're talking about right now. And it's like, hey, the longer the neck, the more concentric I can hold that bullet. And as long as it releases consistently,
Right.
right, with the right neck tension, obviously, the longer the neck, the straighter I'm going to be able to hold it. Um, but man, there was 3 bullets that just did not
Hmm.
shoot well out of that thing.
Yeah.
Put one in, that thing shot in the .2s for a 10-shot group.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And
And so, like, what gives? You look at that and you're like, okay, fair. It is what it is. Okay, this is the bullet that it clearly likes.
right.
Well, why do those other bullets not work? That's the
And
that's the question.
there's a million reasons. It could be one of a million reasons. One, simple enough, is the bullet jacket material.
Mm, yeah.
Okay. How is it releasing from your neck tension that you're using?
Hmm.
Is it, are the two metals going to act in a way that you can depend on it acting the same way every time?
Hmm.
Um, and that might just be your batch of brass too. Who knows?
Sure.
I'm not a metallurgist, but I know that when you move two different metals across each other,
Yeah.
you get differing effects.
Yeah.
Um, so there's that. Then there's, how much the bullet construction itself is it maintaining, its diameter, even though, say, you put a 2000s, just throwing numbers out here, a 2000s neck tension on it.
Hmm.
Well, did the bullet crush, and actually you're not getting 2 thousandths, but your neck diameter did move down. But is it the same resistance as the other bullet?
Yeah, yeah, good
These
call.
are all things that we don't really know unless we go really out into the weeds and find out.
Right.
Then you also have, I mean, you obviously have different ogives of your bullets
Hmm.
between your different manufacturers, different lengths of bearing surface,
Hmm.
and where that sets in the neck, where your boat tail sits in the neck, the angle of the boat tail, the shape of the boat tail, all the other things. And who knows, you may be able to change your neck tension and make a different bullet shoot, but not the one that you're shooting
That's
now.
yeah, that's a good point. And there's where that tinkering comes into play,
Right.
you know?
You
And
know,
like if you don't have time, it's just like, well, clearly that's the one that I'm going to shoot, you know? So,
everybody wants to hit well, not everybody. People like you and I want to hit the easy button on that
yep.
part of it because we want to go shoot,
Yeah. Hmm.
and that's why I shoot the bullets that I do, because it doesn't take much to get the job done.
Yeah, right.
You know.
So let's jump back and talk about let's talk about barrel manufacturing,
Okay.
because there's a, it's, I don't know if it's always a trending topic, right? To talk about these things and what separates one barrel manufacturer from another, because man, there's a lot of good barrels out there nowadays. A lot of good companies are making barrels.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's like, Chevy, Ford, Dodge at that point in time. Or is it?
No, it's not, because if you're talking about everybody making button rifle barrels, then it's probably pretty close to Chevy, Ford, and Dodge. If you want to keep it just in button barrels. If you want to talk about just hammer forged barrels, then you can say that's who do you like better? Um, I've got a little understanding on the button barrels. I got a little understanding on the hammer forged barrels.
Mhm.
I've got the most experience with cut rifling. I've seen broach cut rifling. I've, like I said, mine's with single point. That's the only way you can compare apples to apples, in my mind, is
Yeah,
if you're going to talk about cut rifle barrels. If you want to start talking about cut rifle barrels to button barrels, I don't think it's a fair comparison back and forth one way or the other, because they both have good attributes. Um, it just depends on what you want to use them for, first of all,
yeah,
and what you're expecting out of the gate.
sure, sure.
Okay. I don't think there's a whole lot of difference in a lot of barrels out there if you have a good barrel. I don't care if it's cut rifle, broached, buttoned. I will throw in a couple hammer forged barrels because actually seen some really good
Yeah,
ones of
I've
those.
seen some that shoot.
I've
Yep.
seen some that are, after a few hundred rounds, all in all, they're probably pretty equivalent on what they're going to produce. If they're a good barrel at a couple hundred rounds, then you're talking about Ford, Chevy, and Dodge. But it's getting up to that, and the last 100 rounds
Hmm.
is where I noticed the biggest difference in how your barrel is made.
Okay.
Uh, what I can honestly speak to as far as uh, rifling, I was doing cut rifle, single point cut rifle barrels. I was doing it on a machine that was literally made in 1898.
Hmm.
Pratt and Whitney sign bar machine. It started out here in the United States, did some work during the World Wars, ended up in Scotland for a while. It was actually one that, if I remember my history on this machine, it went over to Scotland, ended up working at Border Barrels for a while. Then they sold it back to Cliff LeBounty up here in Washington, and then it ended up in Arizona.
Okay.
Um, Very cool machine, very low tech.
Hmm.
I mean, the whole quality of it is making your own rifling head that fits the way it's supposed to fit and holds the tools the way they're supposed to
Right.
hold.
That's like it just seems like it's an engineering feat. You know what I mean? Like just to make something that small,
It's a pain.
yeah, like to have something that small produce something so insanely precise.
Right.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah, and for cut rifling, it's all about patience. If you get in a hurry with something, you're going to start wrecking things.
Yeah.
It doesn't take anything to wreck
To
a cut
recommend.
rifle barrel while you're in the middle of making it.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's not so much the barrel that you worry about wrecking, it's the rifling head.
Oh,
Because then you
it's
got to start
ruining the
over and make
tool.
a new one,
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
and it's not something you're going to do in 15 minutes.
Got it. And
Um,
are you like when you were doing that, were you making those tools yourself?
oh, absolutely. To my knowledge, I think I heard rumor that Dave was going to start making rifling heads to order.
Dave.
Kiff out of Pacific Tooling.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it ever happened. I don't know if it was a rumor or just a pipe dream. I'd be pretty excited if he was making them, because I've had to make them, and it's a lot of work just to make one.
So you're actually now forgive my ignorance here, because I've never actually, other than seeing it on, in a video, I've never
Mhm.
actually seen it up close. But you're physically grinding the cutter head. Is that what you're talking about?
That's one part of it.
Okay.
So first of all, you have to make the rifling head itself, which is a two. Well, you take a piece of 01 is what we're making them out of. You drill a hole through it so you have oil passage.
Okay.
Okay, you thread one in. We had to make left-handed threads because of the way the tool advance was on the machine. And then you make a rod that goes on the inside that has an angle on it, a very specific angle. I'm not going to misquote that one right now because I'd have to go back to my notes for that one if I had to start making them again. That uses it as an elevator to push up the tool. Now you actually have to make the tool that goes inside that rifling head. So we'll take that tube that we've made from solid. We'll cut a pocket into it.
Okay.
That has to be on center of that rifling head. Otherwise, you get all sorts of weird rifling shape and you throw it away and start over. So we got to get a very specific diameter. Then we have to cut a pocket into it without warping it. And then we make this tool that sits on top of it. We were taking a piece of tool steel, grinding it to width to where it just barely fit in there. This was not a free running fit inside this box. So we'd have it shaped. We make it, put it in there, pull it back out, and then we would solder a piece of carbide to it, and then shape the carbide to, say, for a 308 barrel. The radius on that piece that's only as wide as the groove
Okay.
needed to be a 308 radius.
Wow.
Excuse me, that'd be the diameter, not the actual radius.
Okay.
If somebody wanted to call me out on that one. So yeah, it'd be 154 radius.
Okay.
So that way you actually had a 308 diameter in the grooves. If you were to pull all the rifling out, you would have a 308 circle.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So we had to have that radius correct, and then the width exactly correct for what we wanted the groove to land ratio to be.
Okay. So yeah. So the width of the groove is the width of the tool.
Yep.
Okay. That makes sense.
Because that's the material we're removing
Got it.
out of the inside of the barrel.
Okay. All right.
So after you got all that, you had to put it on another rod, and hopefully you didn't heat it up and warp it and things like that. So a lot of times what we do is we make them just slightly oversized, do all the machine, and then do a final grind on it to get it down to the exact diameter that we wanted.
So when you say a final grind, what kind of tool what are you doing? Like, what are you doing that with? And again, this is completely new to me in the sense of like the detail aspect of it.
Not a problem. We had a tool grinder that you'll see in a lot of shops for like remaking or resharpening like end mills and things like that. So we could set it up in that, or set it up between centers and use a tool grinder on a lathe to bring it down to that concentric and straight dimension from end to end.
Wow. So you're doing this, are you doing this by just experience, intuition, or are you doing this like, are you reading a printout? Like I've seen you run your machines, right? You're
Right.
reading a printout and saying, right to here.
It's a little of both.
A little both.
When you're making rifling stuff, and we found that it's a lot of feel. Because if I just go off of the machinist handbook and say that for a free running fit down this cylinder, I need to have a 7,000 clearance. Yes, that'll work every time. It'll go in and out of that hole every time, but it won't necessarily track quite right. So we got to run a little closer, but not to run too close. So
because I can only imagine that if you're 7 thou clearance between the edge of I'm assuming that's the edge of that round cylinder that you're talking about,
yeah,
and the ID
Right.
of.
So we're talking about if you were doing it off the machinist handbook, it'd be like a 293 rod going down a 300 hole.
Okay.
Well, that causes chatter and things like that because it has room to move.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, because really you're depending on the length and the diameter of the cutter head backed up to the opposite side of the barrel that it's
Yeah.
cutting on.
Yeah. Okay. That makes total
Okay.
sense. I can see that.
So we can't have it too tight that it wants to push gall and start moving metal. So it's got to be able to run freely and have enough room to create a hydraulic barrier of the oil that we're running down it
Yeah. Okay.
on that backside, so we're not messing up the really nice hole that we put in it in the first place.
Right.
So we gotta play a little bit of back and forth with that, and that takes a little bit of experience and a little bit of feel.
Oh, wow. That's cool. I just find this stuff fascinating because just the level of precision that we're able to achieve is, and then having to, like, we've been doing this shit for over 100 years,
Yeah,
right?
like I said, literally an 1898 machine.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
I mean, the most high tech part of that machine today is the electric motor that runs it.
Yeah. I mean, I was at Ted's place, just chatting with him, picking up those, coup de grace,
Hmm.
and he was showing me, an old Sacco receiver
Hmm.
from back in the day.
Oh
And
yeah,
you look at those things like an old Mauser and an old Sacco, and you're looking at that engineering and what they were able to not only produce, but then mass produce,
oh yeah,
and he's just like, we can't do that today. Like, how they did that 100 years ago is mind boggling.
right.
It's, and so it's almost like, I would equate it to like looking at modern quote unquote tactical gear.
Hmm.
The gear, years ago, like if you look at, a World War II loadout,
Oh yeah.
everything was super simple, only what you needed.
Hmm.
And now, granted, we do need a lot more things because we're able to communicate more. We're able, we're able to do more things technologically. But like when you look at our gear now, it's like all boxy, and it's like, I hate the molly pouches because it's only in one configuration. It's not ergonomically
Right.
correct, and you're stuck.
Yeah.
And I kind of see like modern rifle actions and the majority of it looking like that versus you look at those old Sacco and Mauser actions. It's a freaking work of art,
Oh, absolutely. They
you
were.
know, and just the lines and the smoothness with which all the parts
Hmm.
came together. And like I said, they're mass producing that, not just like a one off.
Right.
That's mass produced.
Well, and keep it. You also have to remember you have to keep a little bit of that in scale.
Yeah,
So
for
when you
sure.
say mass produced,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
we can turn out a lot more Remington style actions today
Totally. Yep.
than you ever could a Mauser for a lot less money.
Yeah.
There's
There's the
there's
difference.
the real key.
Yep.
Um, so the Mauser action, I love the Mauser action. I don't think it has been as right since the original 98.
Mm.
There's so many little hidden features on a 98 that would blow most people's minds.
Once you like get down into the weeds and start
Right,
looking at
and
it.
really
Yep.
understand how it works,
Hmm.
and why you can do a whole lot of dumb things and survive it
Mm.
with that action.
Hmm. Hmm.
I've seen a lot of people, bring in stuff that is let go because they were not doing things with a lot of care. And, I've seen some people get hurt, with these new modern actions and things like that. And I've seen the same thing go through like a 98. And it's like, yeah, so we
Yep.
don't care.
Right. Safety features. Why?
Well, yeah,
Safety features
and
wise.
safety features, metallurgy, things like that. It really floors me how well the old guys had it figured out.
Hmm.
You know, we 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 think we're smarter than we are today. We really do. I mean, I see so many things that they're like, well, I'm using this steel. Okay, congratulations, you're using this steel. It probably makes your machining process is, easier or better to hold tolerances after heat treat and things like that. It makes perfect business sense.
Hmm.
Does it really pan out in the realm of reliability, safety, and consistency?
Right.
And if it does, fantastic. Get after it. That's what we need. Um, but when you're talking about over 100-year-old technology that still just
Just flat out works.
in any condition.
Yeah,
Doesn't care. That's hard to beat.
certainly is. Yeah, man. I mean, I just like that, like I said earlier, I think the next step is learning how to do all this, because it's one thing to talk about it,
Mhm.
but it's another thing to run a machine and see how it all pans out. I've watched I've watched you chamber barrels. I've watched
Mhm.
you chamber barrels for me. Like all the chambers that you've cut for me have been freaking amazing.
Cool.
Your
Thank you.
rifles freaking shoot.
Thank you.
Um, where do you think, we talked a little bit about prefits yesterday,
Mhm.
and the consensus out there nowadays is that the small time gunsmith is quote unquote irritated by the fact that prefits are out there. Is that really something that you feel,
For
or
me, I don't care.
no?
No, because it depends on what level you're looking for,
Hmm.
you know? If you want something that you're going to be changing barrels on a lot, that's probably a more economical way to go. And there's good barrels out there as long as you're doing your part too, as far as making sure that your headspace is right when you're installing your own barrel.
Yep.
Okay. Um, those are the things that I worry about with pre-fit barrels is people doing things. Well, I just screwed it on, so it's got to be good. Every machinist has a bad day.
Sure.
Did you get it? Did you get one that was machined right?
Hmm.
Okay. Check.
Yep.
And it's not hard to check. You have gauges, and you have gauges for a reason.
Hmm.
You know, they're cheap.
Well, so okay, so like let's just say you've got a barrel in your in your opinion, when you obviously you got the tolerance stacking of the receiver
Hmm.
itself, okay? Then you have the tolerance stacking of the barrel, and how accurate that manufacturer can hold tolerances on the barrel
Hmm.
versus how accurate can the manufacturer of the receiver hold tolerances.
Hmm.
And then obviously those two come together, and whatever you get is what you get.
Right.
Um, what is an acceptable, right? We throw the go gauge in there. I don't use a no go gauge. I just use tape.
If I have to use a no-go gauge, I throw it away.
so, um, so we look at that, like what's unacceptable. I know what is Sammy specs 5 to 7 thou.
Depends on the cartridge.
Depends on the cartridge.
So a belted Magnum's 3.
Okay. All right.
3000s, which is kind of funny anyway. There's a whole thing about belted headspaces. So like on your 6.5 PRC or the 6.5 Creedmoor or a 308, any of your more modern bottleneck cartridges, it's 6.
6 thou.
It's 6,000s on average between go and no.
Hmm.
There are a couple of them that have tightened them up a little tighter than that, but it's usually 6,000s between go and no.
Got it. Okay. So obviously we can run into problems if we have excessive headspace, and
Yep.
we're getting inconsistent primary ignition.
Hmm.
Obviously,
You're getting bolt thrust, which is the last thing you want in a gun.
bolt thrust meaning rearward.
Yep, the
Yeah.
amount of force getting applied to the bolt.
Because it's getting a running start
Exactly.
at the bolt lug,
And
or the bolt face rather.
so one of the things that I was trying to tell people is this is how important headspace is. Would you feel safe if we took your bolt out of your rifle and fashioned a collar to it, hooked a giant cable to it, hooked it to the back of your truck, and then held onto that bolt? You get in your truck, and now I'm going to hang you over the Grand Canyon.
Mm. Yeah.
Okay. You don't weigh 60,000 pounds.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Do you want to trust those lugs just simply because they're lugs in an action?
Sure.
Okay. I'm not getting in your truck.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's not even a rapid acceleration like it would
It's
be for a
very
gun.
gradual, right?
Yeah.
It's gradual force.
Yeah. So that's the way I look at headspace. Do I want it to have a run at it? I don't want it to have a run at my face, so let's not give it a run at all.
Sure. Sure. So when you're cutting a chamber, what are you looking for in terms of your acceptable tolerance between the depth of the chamber and the go gauge
So I like to just barely be able to feel the go gauge.
when you close the bolt?
Yeah. So if I was to put a 1,000th shim on the back of a go gauge, it shouldn't close.
Okay. All right. So that's considered a tight.
That's No, what would consider a tight is if you can truly feel the go gauge closing the whole way.
Okay.
So you're actually rubbing on the go gauge the whole way. If you can just tell that it's there, minus no extractor, no ejector, things like that.
Yep.
You know, is it just to where if there was oil on the back of the gauge, the handle would fall slowly?
Yep. Okay.
You see what I'm saying? It's
Yep.
not it's not heavily in contact. It's not really truly in contact, but there's just enough there that there's not much more room than enough for a film of oil.
Got it.
That's being real picky.
No, yeah. I mean, that's why I
You know?
want that's because this is all like the purpose of this is just to talk about like what really matters
Right.
and what really matters when it goes into building a rifle that's just flat out shoots.
Right.
What are you looking for?
And the reason why I'm that picky is not so much from an accuracy standpoint, it's really a safety standpoint because I don't know how you're going to reload
Yeah. How much are you going to size your case?
or what factory you're going to buy off the shelf for.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. I can make this as safe as I possibly can.
Hmm.
Okay. That's a big thing for me.
Yep.
Okay. It does help with accuracy though, because anytime you can hold on to something and not have it get a rattling start in there,
100%.
that's what you get.
Yep. Now, I got another couple questions for you. So, when it comes to fire forming cases, I've heard other people talk about it might take it might take a couple of firings to get a case fire formed. That's one train of thought.
Okay.
And the way that I'm thinking of, I'm like, that's hard for me to wrap my head around and go, is that I can't see how, like, my brain just can't wrap around that. You know what I mean? Like, you're generating so much pressure in that case, unless you're making a massive fire forming jump,
Big change.
a big change.
Okay. Yes, I'll agree with that. So if you're like taking 357 or a 375 H&H and turning it into 458 lot brass, yeah, it might take more than one
Got it.
because you're
Okay.
not actually generating any pressure.
Okay. Yeah.
Just
Because
whatever pops inside the case.
there's so much void in there that needs to be filled.
If you're running some that are fire forming like it was a 6 something and you're going to fire it up to a 6.5 something, you're not really generating much pressure. Okay, just whatever pops when the bullet's still sealing the case.
What about from like a six? What about like a 6 BR to a 6 dasher?
That's a little bit of a movement. It may take 2 depending on your primary load. I would always say go a little lighter on your first load
Hmm.
because I want the second one to where you're actually going to generate pressure to where you're not dependent on the bullet to hold it to the breech face.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want the case to be holding it with the breech face.
Sure. Yeah.
But if you can't get it done in 2, you got some really hard brass.
Got it. Yeah. So yeah, because the I didn't buy BRA brass. I have BR brass, and
Mhm.
I fire formed it. So, and I mean, I can feel it. I can totally feel. I asked my buddy Tom cut that chamber for me,
Mhm.
and he cut it so that like I could truly feel the end of that case neck come right up against
Yep.
that shoulder, man, and you could feel it on every single bolt close. And I knew like I had confidence that every cartridge case was going to be perfect.
Right, cuz it's fully in contact with your breech face.
Yep.
And it's going to seal. So yeah, all your 68,000 psi or whatever you happen to be loading it to,
It's going right into that
it
case.
is going into the case.
Yeah, that's cool. So another thing we were talking about yesterday was measuring using like pressure indicators. We're
Mhm.
jumping into reloading now.
Okay.
Pressure indicators, because there's a lot of false pressure indicators
Mhm.
that like primer cratering. That has everything to do with the size of your firing pin hole.
And the size of your firing pin itself, yeah.
Yeah, so that's not a real good indication
No.
of pressure. What about ejector swipes? That's a
Depends.
classic, right? That's a
That's
classic.
a classic. Where I can find a lot of false pressure signs there is people oversizing their brass and creating headspace.
Oh,
So the brass gets a run at the bolt face and it's not stopping where their ejector is. So it's going to form into the ejector hole.
yeah, yeah. And then when you unlock it, it's
You
going to
get
swipe it.
you get to swipe.
Got it.
Now you can get it with pressure, but I see more of it with false pressure where it's headspace, not pressure.
Got it.
That's more of that bolt thrust.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
amount of the case running into that bolt face.
Okay. So we got so primer pocket dimples,
Mm-hmm.
cratering, whatever you want to call it that.
Right.
We've got well, flattened primers.
Primer flow or shape. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty good indication.
If you've got if you've got good sizing practices and you're keeping your headspace right, absolutely. Otherwise, you also have to think of that can be false too, because when that primer goes off, if you have room between the back of the case and the bolt face, that
It's
primer
gonna
is going to
come.
jump out.
It's gonna come out,
It's going to jump
and then
out
it's
to it,
gonna get smashed.
and then it's going to, yep, exactly. It's
Okay.
going to get reseated back in there. So was it flat because of everything moving back or being in contact and the pressure coming back through your flash hole, pushing on the inside of that vessel of the primer cup itself,
Yeah.
expanding it out, or was it unseated and then forcefully reseated?
Yeah, because that would obviously do that.
So I mean, there's the possibility of false pressure signs. Don't take too many risks with pressure though, because you only get one bad one.
Yeah, you only get one bad one, and then it's kaflooey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what is, in your opinion, what is the fail-safe method to identify if whether or not your charge is generating too much pressure?
For me, with the way I size my brass, to where I know that I'm not moving the shoulder back more than a thousandth.
Okay.
Okay. So that means that I've got a maximum of a 1,000th headspace in there with reloaded ammunition.
Okay.
Okay. When I fire it, I want the bolt to come up with contact a little bit more than just your striker spring pressure
Hmm.
and not have a hard stop at the top where it hits the extraction cam.
Yep.
I want it to flow through the extraction cam, pulling the case free of the chamber.
Hmm.
That's what I want.
Hmm. Okay.
I think after that, you're if you're shooting one shots and that's all you ever plan on shooting is one shot, you could probably go warmer than that. But when you're talking about a performance rifle,
Yep.
trying to do, you know, you got an animal out there and you always plan for your second shot.
Always.
Okay, because you want to give the animal the common decency of putting it down.
Hmm.
So I want it to run smoothly to where if I need it, I have it.
Yep.
If you're in competition, do you want to be disturbing your gun just getting the next round in that you know you're going to have to shoot? Do you want to be so high up on the pressure that you have a warm day or high humidity or things like that? Now you're even higher on the pressure, and now you're really starting to fight with your bolt handle.
Yeah. And you're probably causing, accuracy conditions
Oh, absolutely.
problems because now we are outside of tune. We're
Right.
out of tune from just pure pressure.
Right. So I don't load up as high as pressure as you probably could. I load to performance.
Hmm.
Does it give me what I want for the bullet that I have? And can I operate the gun efficiently?
Right. Yeah. So what about we talked a little bit yesterday about measuring webs
Webs.
with a
Okay.
blade mic.
Okay.
So and what is so the process would be take that virgin piece of brass,
Mm-hmm.
right? Measure it
Yep.
and then log that number and then you would work up your powder charges until that web grows. What's the number that people should be looking at on that if they have the ability to do that and measure in that manner?
Definitely not more than 2/10 in my opinion. 2/10 of 1/1000th.
Two
So the
tenths of
fourth
1/1000.
place
Okay, yeah.
can't be measured with electronic calipers.
Yeah, got it. It's got to be with a blade.
It's got to be with an actual micrometer.
Yeah,
Um, I might be a little bit conservative on that number, but I've never had a gun blow up.
sure,
Okay.
sure.
Um, and then the next little step that you kind of dropped out of there was that you need to fire that one at a reasonable load first
Yep.
to get all that pre-stretch out, and then that's your new baseline.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So if you know that you're well below pressure, you give it that first thump,
Hmm.
measure that. That is your baseline. And from that point on, if it doesn't, as you go up, as long as you haven't got past from that baseline past 2/10,
Everything's
you're
groovy.
you're pretty good.
Okay, cool. Right on. Right on, man. Well, there's so many different other topics, that can go into the weeds and talk about it. Um, I don't know, man. I think that this is probably pretty educational for quite a few folks in terms of just like understanding a little bit more about what's going on inside the rifle and how everything is put together.
I know we've bounced around pretty wildly over this, but hopefully, we didn't go too far out into the weeds on any one thing, and hopefully covered enough of it on any
Yeah,
one subject that people get at least a better idea and some place to start with their own journey on it.
for sure. Yeah, I think that, there's just so much I think it's getting better. I think it's getting a lot better because another friend of mine, he comes out and helps on the range with the local classes. Um, he goes, you remember when back in the day the information flow there was, it was gate kept, if you will.
Oh, absolutely. It was super secret.
It was either super secret and you didn't get the information unless you were hanging out with that crowd.
Hmm.
Like if you wanted to learn shit about bench rest shooting, you had to go hang out with the bench rest guys.
Well, and then that even took time because they didn't want to give up anything that they know, and
No,
and I'll be honest with you, a lot of them still don't.
no, yeah, absolutely.
Because that's their little edge over everybody else.
Hmm.
I used to see that a lot in the firearms industry.
Hmm.
You know, I was lucky. The people that I learned from, uh, they were very adamant about find out what works and share it
Yeah,
because none of this should be a secret.
that's fair. That's a fair thing to say.
You
You
know,
know, and that's I think the same thing. A lot of people ask like, well, you're teaching your students to be your competition. It's like, well, who cares? Like that's
exactly.
the goal, right?
Yeah.
That's the goal. I want my students to shoot better in the long run, and if they shoot better than me, then fantastic.
Well, it goes both ways though. It
Yeah.
also makes you do it right.
And it makes you try to like, well, you're trying to figure out, be a master of your craft.
Exactly.
And so you've got to go as deep as you possibly can to set yourself apart
Mhm.
from other people. And I'm sure that there's things that you've discovered along the way that you're just like, we're going to kind of keep that one close hold or not.
Not really. Not for the gunsmithing stuff for me.
Okay.
I'm a very I'll share anything I know about it.
What
I,
does it come down to though? Like at the end of the day, what does it come down to that separates the good, the bad, and the ugly?
honestly, quality machining practices.
Mm. Is it
Not
safe to say that a good gunsmith is a good machinist before he's a gunsmith or she?
yeah, in a lot of ways because the machining aspect of is pretty simple, really.
Mm,
An actual gunsmith, they are a jack of all trades.
right.
I mean, everything from a cabinet maker to a spring winder to borderline metallurgist to space age composite.
Yeah.
Somebody that has to work with that stuff. In today's market, we've got to deal with all of that stuff and make it work together.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we see new stuff more and more rapidly. But at the same time, I hate to break it down to it for a lot of people is that there has not been anything really new in the gun realm in about 100 years.
Yeah, that's not wrong. It's all pretty straightforward.
I
It's the
mean,
same stuff.
electronic ignition was over 100 years old.
Yep. Hmm.
So I mean that's just a plain and simple fact is that there's nothing really new out there when it comes to actually building the product.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's going to look different. The way they get the machining done gets done differently.
Hmm.
We don't have to broach lugways anymore. We can wire EDM them, things like that.
Hmm.
Um, but when it comes down to screwing a barrel on and getting a bolt to come in and, having a reamed chamber, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So, and the old boys had it figured out a long time before I was ever born.
Yeah. Right.
Maybe just listen up.
Yeah. Just listen up. Yeah. It's like, I mean, I didn't start shooting the BR cartridge until recently. And, it seems like a lot of people are trying to just reinvent that wheel when in the grand scheme, that cartridge is 40 plus years old,
Yeah,
and like, why are we doing this? I mean, obviously bullets have changed.
exactly.
Bullets have been like the main thing that's changed.
And powder composition.
Propellant, composition and propellant consistency for sure. Those things have changed, but the
Yeah.
cartridge itself, it just like it hasn't changed.
No.
It's the same thing, right?
No. And people lose track that brass cases is just a really convenient way to hold all this stuff in one place.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a couple of companies out there that have tried to do it differently, and to be painfully honest, through experience, they don't work.
No, it doesn't work.
They don't work. And I'll be the first to stand there and stand up and say it doesn't work. It might go boom.
No, absolutely.
It's going to combust, right? That ballistic event's going to occur,
Mhm.
but it's not better
No.
in any way, form, or another.
No.
Not at all. So, well, I mean, I think the summary here is that the beauty lies in the basics, just with everything else.
It really does. I mean, running a lathe is running a lathe,
Hmm.
and that's building rifles. If you can run a lathe correctly and understand quality machining principles,
Hmm.
you know, if I want to describe a straight line between 2 points, I can run between centers,
Yep.
and that's a straight line. And what do we want a barrel to do? Be pointed in a
straight.
straight line.
Yep. As close as we can possibly make it, given the material that's in front of us, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
And anybody that thinks that a barrel is a straight tube, I don't care how good the barrel is, it's not.
Yeah, I think that's pretty commonly known
And I
nowadays.
don't think you want it to be.
Okay. All right. Would that take all of the allure out of it?
Well, I think that would give you a whole bunch of inconsistencies,
Okay. All right.
because what's in control now? I'm gonna throw this one out on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
list for you.
Yeah, yeah.
If you have a cylinder,
Okay.
a barrel,
Hmm.
okay, that the material is completely, I want to use the right word here, homogeneous. It's perfectly molecularly, everything about it is just wonderful from end to end. Okay. And the concentricity of the outside of the inside is absolutely perfect.
Okay.
Okay. And you make it vibrate.
Hmm.
Is it going to return back to the same place every time?
That's a good question. Um,
Because if you take a hose and you whip a hose
mhm.
and it lays down in one direction, and you whip it again, you can use a machine to whip it again. Does it lay down in the same exact place every time?
No.
But that's what we want, isn't it?
We would want the barrel to return, right? We would want the muzzle to return when the vibration dampens and everything is now at homeostasis. And
To the same point that the scope was pointed last time.
correct. Yeah. That would be the goal.
That would be the goal.
Yeah.
And I think if you have something that is absolutely perfect from end to end, it won't be. I can't prove it, but that's my thought.
That's a good thought. That's a good thought to ponder on. Yeah. Yeah. Cause I mean, I
I'd
remember.
like to have smarter people show me wrong or right on that. I'd really like to know.
Yeah, indeed.
But that's why I don't really worry about some of these people who go, oh, I can see a little bit of distortion in the barrel. How does it shoot? Tell me how it shoots. That's
Right.
all I want to know.
Right.
I want to know how it shoots.
Because if it shoots fine, then it's doesn't matter.
Well, apparently that's what perfect is. If it shoots great, that's what perfect is.
I mean, that's at the bottom line. Yeah, that's exactly what we're looking for. So how much more perfect can perfect be?
Right. Or
Yeah.
what is? Maybe we've been defining it wrong.
Yeah, indeed. I just think that, out of all the things that I've chased and out of all the things that I've wondered over, pondered over, lost sleep over, questioned, now through all of my experience, I mean, that reloading press right there, I bought that when I was 14 years old,
Oh, yeah.
and I still got the same
Is that
dies.
a rock checker?
Yeah. It's an RCBS rock chucker. I bought it when I was 14, and that was, 30 years ago. So it's the same thing. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. The equipment's getting better. The dies are getting more precise, and
Absolutely.
so on and so forth. But at the end, it's just that process still remains the same. And the beauty lies in the basics.
Absolutely. I can't say it any better than that.
Yeah, man. Well, where can people find you if they want to get some work done by you? What's JD's deal?
So I'm the smith for the Range LLC out of Yakima.
Mhm.
I accept work from all over the country right now. So finding me there shouldn't be very hard. The Range LLC.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Been there for I think 7 years now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good, and you did some home smithing for a little while
Yeah.
and then you went to the range, and that's because I think you're able to do so many more things there.
Well, I
And
just got tired of doing the paperwork.
yeah, I can totally feel I can, as a small business owner, I can totally feel that, like, to my core. It's just like, oh my God, if I could, yeah,
I just, I
there's,
just, I just want to do my job. I want to smith. I want to work on guns.
yeah,
Everybody else can do the paperwork.
I hear that, man. Nobody can, I mean, if anybody tries to fault you for that, go run your own business and see what you say. So, well, man, I really appreciate you coming out. And, well, I mean, hell, you just live,
Yeah,
maybe
just over the hill.
about a mile away, if
Yeah,
that. So thank you for coming over after work and having a conversation. And I think there's going to be, plenty more opportunities to talk about,
that'd be
more
fantastic.
specifically focused things, and we'll let the audience tell us what they're looking for. So,
That'd be fantastic. I'd really appreciate that. I mean, this is my first podcast, so
oh,
second
okay.
time in the seat. This seat, you've had somebody. This is my first
Well, I'll
time.
tell you what, man, you did great. Yeah, usually we just have a conversation, and sometimes it does go in a bunch of different directions, and that's totally okay. So I would rather have it. I don't want it a podcast to be like overly produced and all like,
I'm not good with schedules.
yeah, man, I'm not good with schedules. I can't do scripts. I can't do any of that stuff. It just, everything has to be, it's got to be authentic and real.
Yeah,
So that's just me too. So, well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. So,
anytime.
we
Thank
will
you.
we'll see you again next time, dude.
Sweet.
Thank you. All right.
All right, man.
That was cool.
We survived.
Yeah, we did.